We're back, and with us today is Dr. Christian von Laar, who is a medical intuitive, can see into the layers of the body, your organs, your lymph nodes. If you've ever had an operation, he sees that down to the cellular level. Really amazing stuff. And we're talking about seeing nature spirits and where they reside, and really focusing on magic and what it means and how it's connected to the nature spirits and how we can employ it in our lives through the direction of the nature spirits that they give in their book, The Magic of Gnomes and Leprechauns, It's Natural. So Christian, I know a lot of people think about leprechauns and mushroom having some connection. Is that true?
Well, I'm thinking back to the 60s here. Let me get my mind straight. Okay, yeah, mushrooms actually are, it isn't just the leprechauns too. It's the gnomes that really are drawn to the mushrooms. This is like one of the biggest vegetables in the nature kingdom. It's so important to them. You just can't
Is it a fruit? Is it a vegetable?
Yeah, you
Is
can't
it a
grasp
fungus?
all the ways, okay? For example, they may use it for decoration, okay? We'll talk about food in a minute, but they put it outside of their universities and foreign temples.
Oh, that's right. We talk about Gnome University in the first book, A Gnome's Story, where the nature spirits set up a university for all the nature spirits around the world to come and learn how to interact with humans and how that works and how to kind of teach us a lot of information.
Yeah, again,
well.
because we're taking over the world, the gnomes had to say, look, we got to fit in. There's no way for us to succeed. They have to be working with humans. So they created the university to learn how to interact, and that's how they came to me. I was one of the first ones, and there was a gnome that was kind of psychic. The cover of the first book, Peter John, and A Gnome Story was the book. He was the more psychic, and he learned to work with me, and we started getting their story out, and they passed the information on to the other gnomes at what we call a university, and they're teaching people what humans are like, what they like to do, how they can fit in, and so it's like a school system, yes.
And it's very much like a school system. They have like a opening week where all the children are arriving from all around the world. I remember one gnome came from India and had that very special Indian accent, which was so lovely. And what was very noticeable, though, is right where the Gnome University was, about 2 feet in front of it were a row of mushrooms that just popped out of the grass, growing everywhere.
Yes, they pop up magically. Isn't that interesting?
It seems like they're there one moment.
Yeah, definitely.
They weren't there, right? Yeah. It just happened so quickly. And I said to Christian, well, what do you think is going on here? We have the mushrooms, and Christian got that was the opening weekend to welcome the nature spirits back, that they see something comforting and lovely when they see those mushrooms at the entrance.
So that was one example, but any major event there'll be mushrooms there because it's so revered. But they use them in food, but they can actually live in them because they can change their size. Mm-hmm. Like you're talking about the magic of leprechauns. If you go inside of a mushroom where there are leprechauns, you're going to find that it's full of little cubby holes and all the little potions and the things that they do to do magical functions.
It's like deep cavernous caves in there, and this is where the leprechauns have told us that they keep all their magical supplies and cubby holes.
This is probably going to sound weird or out there to most people, but put yourself in the mindset of another kind of life, okay, where they don't have our science. They have to use things of nature. So in that mushroom, which is just a structure to them, they can change their size. They're going to need some gold and some copper and some silver and some water. Water from different parts of the world actually has different properties.
That's right.
So they collect water from the Nile, something from the Tigris, and all of these things have certain properties. Well, come on. Why is that so hard to believe? We have medicine. We have plants. It's the same thing adjusted to their kingdom. So magic to them is actually using nature for some practical purpose.
Exactly.
We're more esoteric and we think, well, we don't do that, so it must not be true. Mm-hmm. But it is. It's a way of life for them. How did we get to where we are? We went through that stage. Now, they can live in those mushrooms too, which is why they're so fond of that rounded roofs on their houses.
Why you don't want to disturb the mushrooms when you see them growing in your garden. And if you need to, you could set up some protective little fences or barriers from the animals or the yard people. But you want to respect those mushrooms when you see them.
And let's talk about the obvious for food. Yes, mushrooms are a great food for gnomes and leprechauns.
Oh my gosh, I can remember.
There is the number one food, it goes up there with cheese and butter, right, with the gnomes, is mushrooms because it has all these different properties. Think about how many kinds of mushrooms there are. for.
There's so
okay?
many, and they're healing properties
And,
to
and
them.
they don't usually, they don't consume meat as we would, but they use the term meat because they make it out of mushrooms, and it's called mush meat. Right?
That's right.
Remember the mush meat pies that they make?
Well, we went to this one cafe and they had mushroom sandwiches on the menu, and this was like so amazing to the leprechauns that they were with us. It was like seventh heaven. Oh my gosh, we have to get a mushroom sandwich.
Yeah, humans are finally getting it, right?
Yeah, they're getting it. They're doing something right? And so we got the mushroom sandwiches, and they just love it. So
well, of course, on those mushroom sandwiches, we put these big slabs of cheese, and man, if there's anything that's up there close to mushrooms, it's cheese with gnomes.
right, and leprechauns, of course, like the mushrooms. So do the gnomes. I mean, if you want to have a homemade mushroom soup, and we have made it on the Christopher Valentine show, you're going to be attracting nature spirits, and it is a wonderful meal. Gnomes love homey foods like soups, breads, homemade jams. Dairy products, like Christian was saying, are huge. So you have your cheeses, your cream cheese,
You know,
your whipped cream.
this reminds me of a story. I was going to bring something here for today's show, and I forgot. The gnomes had asked me last Christmas for a craft table, okay? Because we're doing all these TV shows, and I said, "Oh, I guess they're going to do crafts." Because you have a show where you do crafts, right?
Yeah.
And so me being so logical, I went and I got him a cheese board and put some cheese on a board. I thought that was a craft table to me. And it sort of was a good metaphor because they just love cheese.
Yeah, cheese pizza. If you're gonna really make the gnomes happy, cheese pizza is great, and popcorn, buttered popcorn. They love butter. That's dairy again.
Now this is an interesting point, and I don't know that everyone has garnered what we're saying here. The nature spirits actually go for the etheric counterpart of things.
Yeah.
Let's go back to how we opened with consciousness. We exist in like 7 great realms. That's why we have a spirit way up there, way at the top, and we're way down here. 7 different realms there, and they have subdivisions. So we have a little bit of consciousness that we're drawn from for each one of those. Now, the nature spirits live in energies a little bit higher than us, but they're still part of the physical. But every atom that exists physically, the lower, denser ones, is surrounded by these other layers of consciousness. So, I could have a chocolate chip cookie here, and the gnomes could eat that chocolate chip cookie, and you say, wait a minute, I still see it there. That's because they took the etheric energy that's wrapped around the atoms. On the astral plane, by the way, where people have passed over, they also see that cookie, and they're more visibly acknowledging the astral counterpart, which glows kind of yellow to them, and even in the heavenly realm. So every atom here exists everywhere else. And so yes, they eat the milk with honey, the fruits, the mashed potatoes, the butter, and they like it. I mean, they love it.
My gosh,
they
do
love
they
what
like
butter
it.
tastes like in the etheric plane.
Well, we have another story where Christian is a fantastic chef, and he was preparing Thanksgiving dinner and making a great big bowl of mashed potatoes, fluffy white mashed potatoes, and we have this gnome called Billy, and he's one of our musically inclined gnomes that is an expert or genius piano player, and he saw this big bowl of mashed potatoes, and he's right in front of it, kind of just teetering back and forth, just looking at it.
And there was ladles and ladles of gravy in there too, as I recall. Yeah.
Well, maybe some butter, and I think the gravy's on the side, because what happened was Billy fell face first into the mashed potatoes and was completely covered.
Yeah, he was in gnome heaven.
So, yeah, they love mashed potatoes. And
Literally got delirious. So there's certain foods that have a stronger etheric influence.
well, that would
in
make
these different
sense
realms.
because potatoes are growing under the earth. They're earth nature people, so they're going to like potatoes, turnips, things that grow underground, carrots.
Let's look at the cover here. We're speaking of leprechauns. Now, many people, when they think of leprechauns, they're thinking, oh, they really like grog and spirits. They do, but it's not the alcohol that we are consuming. They like the fact that it was made of those hops and things. And on the etheric subplane, it actually makes them more magical.
Yes, and if you, speaking of spirits, meaning wine, beer, things like that, grog as they call it, if you want to attract nature spirits to your home or garden, this is one of the best things you can do. Christian and I do not drink, but I get a 6-pack of beer, and they actually have a brand that they like. I don't know if we'll mention that or not. And
Go ahead.
well, I asked them one day.
Maybe we'll get an endorsement for the leprechauns.
Well, I says, first of all, what kind of beer do you like? Do you like the lager, or there's all different types, ales, stouts? There's so many different varieties, and they said, I believe it was a stout.
Mhm.
I can't remember. I'll have to check the brand again. And then, it dawned on me, well, maybe they have a certain brand that they like, and they said Heineken. Well, it turns out Heineken is an import, at least to the United States, from the Holland, which is where it is believed gnomes have originated from, Scandinavian area. So that kind of made sense
And
to
they
us.
also like Jameson's whiskey, but again, it's the materials that the whiskey is made out of.
So what you do is or what we did when we first started out is I would pour a little bit of beer in a small glass and put it in the area that I designated for the gnomes, then in another area for the leprechauns. And over time, they call it...
This reminds me of another cooking incident. It was for a holiday also, and I think I was making a ham, a Bavarian type ham, and you put all the cloves and all the stuff in there of the cinnamon and the herbs, and you slice it around, and you drench it with like a Bavarian beer and butter. Constantly, you baste it with this, and some maple syrup and some molasses and things, okay? And so I'm going to serve it, and there must have been like an inch of sauce, thick, syrupy Bavarian beer sauce in there. But by the time everybody came to the table, the sauce was all gone.
Really?
That's the time when they actually took the sauce.
Sometimes they can take the physical counterpart, but more often than not, don't be upset if you don't see it there the next day. But what they are doing is they're thoroughly taking in the food, the nutritional value, and the taste of that beer that you're putting out for them, or wine, or like Christian was saying, Jameson's Irish whiskey. And when we come back, we're going to be talking more about the nature spirits and how magic can be employed in your life through herbs, crystals, and plants that they recommend to you for abundance, relationship, and health. Join us when we come back.